In this video, I'm going to show you a step-by-step demonstration of a 30 by 40 painting I did of Yosemite Valley. And I want to emphasize three things. First one is how to simplify the shape to make the drawing read better in the painting, and how to simplify the values to show the shape of the objects in the painting and not paint the unnecessary details and stuff that's in the photograph. And then lastly, the thought process of mixing color, and I'll show the palette and the color mixtures and what I'm thinking as I'm trying to suggest the light with the color. Now this is the photograph I'm going to use. It's Yosemite National Park with the Merced River here. I was there a couple of years ago in the fall, painted there for about a week and got hundreds of photographs. And so this is one I brought back to the studio to use and do a 30 by 40 from it. And I'll show kind of a step-by-step process of mixing color and so on. Now, what I want to do is think in terms of how to simplify this three ways. I want to simplify the shapes. I want to reduce it to 4 to 8 large masses. There's a lot going on here, but I'm going to force everything into just, I think, 6 large shapes is what I did. And then value-wise, I want just 2 values in each of those shapes. Because value is what creates detail, and I want to reduce the detail. So if I have, like in the trees here, there's a lot of little darks and lights everywhere, and that creates a lot of detail that breaks up that big shape and makes it harder to paint, harder to figure out the values, and harder to mix the color. So, starting with shape, I want 6 big shapes here. So I got kind of the shape of the sky is 1. Shape of the mountain here is 2. Then shape of these yellow trees, cottonwoods back in here, will be 3. And then shape of the water be 4. Then the sandbar 5. And then this foreground grassy area will be 6. So I have 6 big shapes. Now I do have the shapes of the tree trunks, which are real important, but they aren't big masses. They're just going to go on top of the 6 big shapes. But I'm going to force all the little tiny shapes I see into those 6 shapes. Then it'll be easier to simplify the value. And when I simplify the value, it's easier to come up with colors that work and suggest the light. So when I simplify value, again, I might have, 15, 10 values in these yellow trees. I want to make just 2, just a simple dark and a light. Same thing with the cliff face here. There's quite a few values. I want to have just 1 dark value. You can kind of see the dark pattern. And I'll use, in the reference here, this kind of big shape. I'll pull some of it together, get rid of a lot of the little tiny cracks and crevices. Just pick out the major ones that best show kind of the form on the cliff, but just using 2 values. Same thing with the yellow cottonwoods here. There's going to be a dark pattern there and a light pattern. I mean, the red scribbles here don't make much sense, but that's what I'm going to do. And then from there, we'll simplify color. And it's just a lot easier to think about those 3 things if I can simplify. So, going to the canvas here. This is a 30 by 40 stretch canvas. It's linen. It's gesso primed. And I toned it real lightly with a little bit of burnt sienna, just to give me kind of a half tone. And then I filled out those shapes. So I got the shape of the sky, shape of the cliff, yellow trees in here, and then the water and the sandbar and the foreground green grass. So all that is lined out. I started with line. Sometimes I'll just start with value and then come back and use outline to refine it. But this was much easier just to do a quick gestural outline of those big shapes. Before I started drawing, I did do a line down the middle horizontally and vertically just to find the center, just to make sure these tree trunks here don't line up in the center, or the horizon line, which is probably about right there, doesn't line up dead center. So this is a quick drawing, doesn't take long, although I wiped off 3 or 4 times because I didn't like the formation of those 6 shapes. If I got one a little too big, too small. So it wasn't tight, detailed outlining. It was big, simple outline. But I wanted to make sure I had the right proportions. And I try and stay with more angular lines when I draw. That forces me to look a little bit more carefully. It also makes the shapes look more solid rather than just rounding everything off. Again, I got kind of short angular lines there. It just gives the mountains, the trees, the rocks just more solidity. Now next, then I added the figures on horses here. I wanted to add something into it. The photograph does have these 3 figures here. I kind of like that as well, but I opted for these figures on horses, and I have a lot of references from ranches in Tucson and New Mexico and some in California where I've gone, photographed, did some drawing, and I just keep them on file to use them in landscapes. It adds a little human element to it, which I like to do. So next stage is big, broad, transparent color stage. And the color here isn't very refined, just simple idea of kind of the overall color scheme I'm going to use. And it's pretty much going to be blue and yellow orange, which are kind of complementary colors. And if the big masses are mostly those 2 colors, blue and orange, complementary colors, it's going to give the painting a bit more vibrancy. Now, if I made everything in here, all the colors, some kind of blue, blue-green, blue-violet, it wouldn't have that same energy to it because it's the complementary colors, the colors that are close to being on the opposite ends of the color wheel, the opposite sides of the color wheel. When you put them next to each other, they kind of vibrate. So when I put that yellow-orange next to kind of a blue, it creates more tension, as opposed to blue mountains, blue-green trees. That's a bit more peaceful. And I wanted more tension, plus it was fall. Anyway, so that was pretty much the color scheme and the reference. But you do want to think through what colors you're going to be blocking in with. So very transparent, just ultramarine blue, a little bit darker ultramarine blue for the shadows on the cliffs. I've tried to stay away from any white at this stage. I might have a little bit in the yellow orange. So this is yellow and orange. It's probably yellow and a little burnt sienna, or yellow and violet to make a darker yellow orange. And then a blue and ochre for the green pine trees scattered around, and blue and ochre or blue and burnt sienna for tree trunks, and then ultramarine blue and a little blue and alizarin for some of the shrubbery there. So very simplified color. I am looking for some value. You can see I have the shadow pattern on the cliff kind of outlined and filled in with the blue. I didn't put in the color on the cliff because it's just so light. It'd be mostly white, and this is actually a pretty good value for it, just a toned canvas with a little bit of burnt sienna. So that gets me where I want to be for this stage. I can kind of get a feel for colors. Now, the grass here in front isn't blue, but it is very, very cool, and this blue will help keep the kind of orange-green, yellow-green, reddish-green grass kind of in the cool shade there. Keep it in the shadow. And I'll really be contrasting the sunlit yellow reflections in the water, the yellow trees, the kind of muted yellow-orange areas in here with, again, the blue shadows here, blue sky, and the blue foreground. Kind of sets up my overall color scheme and gets everything filled in with a little bit of color. Kind of gets rid of the white. Now I'm going a bit more opaque, starting in the background here, and I'm doing shadows for the most part. So this is white and blue, maybe a touch of burnt sienna, something to modify the blue. I might have a little bit of alizarin, so it might be blue-violet with a tiny bit of burnt sienna. This is ochre here with dioxazine purple, a little bit of dioxazine purple. Might have some orange in it as well. I knew I have orange there. So kind of yellow-orange, using the dioxazine purple to darken the foliage here and here and here and here. And that sets off the darker, cooler orange, yellow-orange, against the brighter, stronger sunlit yellow-orange on the kind of middle ground cottonwood trees. And here, kind of zooming in, I'm starting on the lights. And I'm using 3 values now. So these are the kind of yellow-orange, yellow-green, that kind of, those 3 colors. Again, pretty definite with those colors. I'm not just mixing till I think I match the photograph. I want to go yellow, yellow-orange, and yellow-green for the sunlit cottonwoods, maybe some aspens in there. So I'm using 3 values. A lot of yellow-green in this area, and here's the darker yellow-green. Again, ultramarine blue, cad yellow, a little bit of burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is kind of the big modifier I'm using in this painting to kind of mute all the colors. The blue shadows back in here have a little bit of burnt sienna in them just to keep them from being straight from the tube blue. And then blue and ochre, keeping it pretty dark for these pine trees. I started out with the idea of having some snow, adding snow to it just to add more contrast, but later decided I didn't need more contrast. The contrast that the reference had in it worked well enough. Now here's kind of the, well, before I do this, let's go to this. This is the sky. I started with the sky now and kind of zoomed in, I'll zoom in a little bit, and filling in the sky. And it's going to be, again, 2 values of blue. I got a darker blue and a lighter blue down here. And I kind of chop it in, fill in with those 2 values of blue. And then some other colors, some orange, some alizarin crimson, some viridian. But here's the colors I'm using. So this is ultramarine blue right here for the darker sky, and then kind of I have 3 values. Then kind of in the middle I have ultramarine blue with a little bit of phthalo blue, and then here the lightest I have phthalo blue. So I have 3 values of blue, and that shows the depth in the sky. If I don't have value change, the sky is going to look flat, but if I have a darker blue up here, a little bit lighter here, and lightest here, that's 3 values, and I chop them in with a lot of other colors as well. And that gives me more depth in the sky there. But the ultramarine blue, and phthalo, and then phthalo green, or phthalo blue. And that's the 3 blues for the sky. Then here I have alizarin crimson, orange. Yeah, I think that's alizarin crimson again. Don't know why I have 2 of them. And then viridian. And these are the colors I'm going to use, kind of accent colors to break up the sky. The sky's a blue, going from a stronger, cooler blue to a lighter, warmer, almost blue-green in the sky. And then using these to kind of chop in. And that's this close up here, you can see that. Here's this darker blue. Here's the middle value blue and the lighter blue down in here. Not a big jump in value, but some. Painting around these subtle cloud patterns in there. I don't want to try and paint the cloud on top of the blue. So I'm chopping this in using probably a number 4, number 2 flat bristle brush, because a bristle holds a bit more than a synthetic for what I want right here. Then coming back with a number 2 and just wet into wet, chopping in the orange, the alizarin, the viridian, and that breaks up the color, because on a clear blue sky there's a lot of vibrancy of different colors. And it's not that you can look at the sky and pick these colors out, but it does kind of vibrate. If you just stare at the clear sky close to the zenith, not straight up or right at the horizon, but there is a lot of vibration of color. And technically there's supposed to be the whole range of colors within the blue there. So that's what I'm trying to show. Edgar Payne did that real well, as well as a lot of other artists as well. And here I'm also blocking in the foliage, the shadowed foliage. And you can see, and I'm using somewhat of a small brush on these because I have the big shape on this shadowed foliage all figured out. I've got the big shape, I've got the sky cut in around it, so I know what the shape is going to be. So I can use the smaller brush stroke to kind of fill in. And as I'm doing that, I'm using a variety of colors. And you can see that here. Oops. Let me get back to my, here we go. Get rid of some of those. Here's my mixture for the leaves here, and it's pretty much a yellow-orange. That's my, again, you have to have an idea of color in mind. So I know I'm going to use these 3 colors are going to be my main colors: yellow, yellow-orange, and the yellow ochre is thrown in there. So yellow, yellow-orange all mixed in here. Some of it's a bit more yellow, some of it's a bit more orange, and then I want value change. So I got kind of lighter shadow, middle shadow, and darker shadow. And here I have violet and orange using this dioxazine purple. This dioxazine purple is a Georgian oil color. It's a Daler Rowney, and it's called gray violet, but it's dioxazine purple and white. And I buy it because it's just so convenient. Dioxazine purple is real dark, and I spend so much time getting it lighter to use it in these lighter values that I found it easier just to get that. So it's the dioxazine purple and orange, and I don't mix flat on the palette. I do want to get all the white mixed up. If I'm adding white in here to lighten it, I'll get the white mixed up. But the color, I don't mind if the colors aren't totally mixed. And you can see some of the little cleaner violet kind of running through it, some cleaner orange, and then some of it mixes together. And it makes for a nice color variation. Same thing here. And I'm adding a little viridian, a little orange, a little bit of alizarin and a burnt sienna here, just to get the yellow-orange darker in the shadow. And I mix this up with a palette knife. The canvas is too big to mix up with a brush, and then you put a couple of brush strokes down, then you got to stop and remix. So I mix up quite a bit of paint, and this is after I've put the paint on, and this is what's left. So I always end up wasting some paint, but I would rather do that and have a lot of paint available so that I get a lot of color and paint down on the canvas. Because color does not make a strong statement if you have it real thin. So get used to trying to make it real thick. So again, working on the sky, the shadow on the foliage here. I've been through that, and through that. But you can see I'm chopping in the colors, the green, a little bit of alizarin, added to that mixture. This is the main mixture there. A little bit of the violet. So chopping those in, somewhat haphazard or randomly, but it's not slapdash. I'm real careful, but I do want it loose looking, which sounds like contradiction, but kind of a careful looseness maybe. I'm careful with the drawing and the value. The application, I want it to look a little looser. And here adding more, again, the yellow, darker yellow, and this is cad yellow, a little bit of orange, and probably some burnt sienna and or violet, just to cool it off a little bit. But that's on the yellow side of the spectrum here, and I'm just looking for lighter value and darker. Some of it's yellow-green, some of it's yellow, and a little bit of yellow-orange. So a variety of color in there, but I'm really concerned, or really focusing on the value, getting these different value shapes, and cutting in, using the light yellow, yellow-orange to cut in on this shape to give me a more interesting shape there. And I do that with everything, the clouds, the trees here, foliage. A lot of using the negative brushstroke to cut in and shape up positive things. Like this in here, using the yellow, yellow-green, yellow-orange sunlit shapes to cut in on these shadowed shapes. Again, which are violet and orange, violet and yellow-orange, maybe violet and alizarin and a little orange. Any kind of combination I can think of. And it's not that I'm looking at the reference and I'm seeing those colors. I'm really not. Let me zoom in here. I don't see those colors in there. It's probably mostly green with a little bit of yellow-orange. I didn't want as much green. I wanted more yellow, yellow-orange. So, let me find where I was. So the color, or the photograph, is a place to start. It gives me an idea of where to jump off color-wise. But I'm using the color wheel and making decisions based on what I want the painting to look like. And the color, or the photograph, kind of helps me along. But I understand now why artists of the past, a lot of them, that's all you had was black and white photography. But if they used photography, that's all they used was black and white. Because they wanted to use their own color scheme, their own color sense. Now, I don't do that. I use color photography, but I don't hesitate to come up with colors that I think work better. It's not a big jump or change from the photograph, but I'm not using the photograph to copy from. And another one here, really using these dark pine trees carefully because they really accent or really make the shadowed yellow-orange and the sunlit yellow-orange really stand out. These dark shapes are real important abstractly to the composition because they break it up really nicely. And here I have, with the blue shadow on the mountain and the blue sky and the yellow-orange and some of the blue-violet in the sky. All those complementary colors really create a vibration. And I have those same colors within right here. It's just more basically just yellow, yellow-orange, but I do have violet, some green, some red-violet within that darker yellow-orange grouping of colors. Now I get so far with the step-by-step and then I just finish. So I wish I would have taken a few more steps. But this is more of the mixing. This is the mixing for the cliff. So let's go to the cliff first. Here's my cliff finished, almost finished. And this is, I see the cliffs as an orange. So this is orange and white with a little bit of blue. Now it looks somewhat bluish, but that's actually fairly warm. If I were to take a blue, real light, and put it down there, you can see this spot of blue makes the surrounding cliff look a lot warmer. And it is, because it's mostly orange. Just enough blue to gray it down, but it's still it's a warm gray using blue and orange. And then the shadow is blue with a little orange to mute it and some burnt sienna. But I started with ultramarine blue and a tiny bit of orange, filled it in, and then ultramarine blue and a little burnt sienna. Or I might have started with blue and burnt sienna, I'm not sure. But burnt sienna is a muted red-orange anyway, so either one of those will help mute or tone down the blue. Then I added more color, and I'll show you the mixtures in a minute. There's some violet, really stronger violet there. Let me go back to a red marker. You know, some red-orange in there, violet. So I got a lot of colors within the shadow. Don't have a lot of color change on the cliff. I don't remember if I added more later or not, but I do have 3 values now. Gone from 2 values, which is much easier to work with color-wise, to 3, and I have the light, the halftone, and the shadow. You can see the halftone in there. It just gives one more bit of depth to the cliff here than just two values, so that the cliff goes this way, then that way because of the halftone, and then that way because of the shadow. Without that halftone, it would just do this. So it adds just a bit more form to the shape. Same thing with the trees. I started off with just the light and the dark, and I got a little bit of halftone chopped around in there. It's not as clear cut as the cliff is. I don't know if that changes later or not. But I'm thinking now that I have everything somewhat blocked in to use 3 values of these colors. So as I'm mixing color, I have to be thinking of, well, let me go back to my, when I'm mixing these colors, I have to be thinking of the value, because that's much more important than the color I'm mixing. I could use different colors to come up with the same value and it would still work. So the color is pretty much just a choice. It's the value and the temperature of the color that matters. So here's my cliff color. This is white and orange. Here's kind of the half tones in here. Again, I'm using a palette knife to mix these up so I have bigger piles. And again, I'm pretty much done. And this is what's left over. So I don't hesitate to mix up a lot of paint. I do scrape these off and use a little bit of, I do scrape these off and make a bigger pile over here. I just hate to throw it away. I end up eventually scraping them off and throwing them away because they just dry. But can't be afraid of wasting paint when you want to learn about color. So, and then here's the shadows. It's the blue-violet. It's a blue-violet mixed with orange. There's a little bit of burnt sienna or orange in the blues just to mute them a little bit. But I'll do a lot of mixing right on the canvas. But you can see the 4 values of slightly different color. A little warmer, a little cooler, cooler yet, and coolest for the shadow. Then I'll take some alizarin crimson. I think this is permanent red rose. And I'll add make those colors the right value, wipe most of it off the brush, and just scrub it into the color right on the canvas. So let me go back to cliffs here, and you can, I don't have much of that broken color. I do have it in the shadow, a little more broken color in there. And there's kind of a close-up of the same thing. And now I still have the snow. I take the snow out eventually. But I'm dropping these colors just straight down here. Again, starting with just one color, and then the blue streaks in the water that kind of show through. The edges are just a lot softer in the water, where in the actual trees, the edges are a bit harder. And that separates the reflection from the real tree. But I'm using same color combinations, yellow, yellow-orange, yellow-green, with some burnt sienna and violet to kind of mute those colors a little bit more. And getting the greens down in here. These are blue and ochre for the most part to block in the color. But then I have everything. Got some violet, got some orange and violet, alizarin crimson with a little bit of green in it. But it all kind of funnels back to this same greenish. It's not a blue-green. It's cooler. Or it's warmer than that. But I have enough blue in it that it's cool enough. It stays in the shadow compared to the reflection in the yellow trees there. Now here's the riders finished. I didn't take in between images. Would have liked to have, but I just had to hurry to finish the painting. And these are done with like number 2 synthetic brushes, number 2 and number 4. But I'm trying to do the same thing here. I have a definite color, like for the shirt, violet, green. So I've got a warm violet, a cool violet, warm green, cooler green, a burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, and ultramarine blue for the horse, main color. And I would just do a simple dark and light of that mixture. Burnt sienna and alizarin crimson with a little blue. Then I would come back a bit more orange and scrub some orange right on the sunlit area of the horse. A little bit of green, a little bit darker blue and probably alizarin crimson for the darkest part of the shadow. And just start breaking it up. But it helps to have an idea of the basic color first and 2 values of that color. I can always come back and add more color directly on the canvas to kind of break up the color as well. The drawing was the hard part on here, and that I really wanted to be careful about because there's a lot of foreshortening, which means there has to be a lot of overlapping. If I don't see most of the top of the hat and overlapping the face quite a bit, it's not going to read that I'm looking down at the rider. It might be that I'm more eye level. So I had to make sure that I see the top of the hat, top of the shoulders, top of the thighs here. Otherwise, it's so easy to make it eye level view if you're not thinking about it. And you lose the view of the figures. And the view is very important. That all that foreshortening made it look like I was looking down on the horse and the rider. Didn't work as well on the horse now that I look at it. It doesn't have that looking down at foreshortened view. It's not glaring, but there's a lot of mistakes in all my paintings, but it's just one of them. And here, just continuing with the block end, and this is where I start finishing. I didn't get to the tree trunks yet. I don't either for a step-by-step, but I do have the finished painting here. Tree trunks are aspens, so they're going to be a lot lighter and cooler. And I spend a lot of time coming back into the big shapes and adding more detail. And, that's not always an option you want to pick. Like I added a lot of detail down in here. I got carried away. I do like it, but I don't need to do that much detail. It's a bigger painting. I tend to get caught up in detail a little bit. A lot of color variation here on the tree trunk. The tree trunk is pretty much just 3 values: shadow, light, and the dark part where the bark fell off. And then I just threw in color variation, some light reflected in there with warm colors, some cooler spots, just to break up the color. Soften the edges in the water, a big soft synthetic brush, or sometimes just a 2-inch chip brush from a hardware store of just dragging down, cleaning the brush off, and then dragging again just to soften the edges. But the final stage, which I don't show a lot now of, is just the broken color. You can see the dark and light shapes on the aspens or cottonwoods. I'm not sure which one those are. Aspens down here maybe. I got 3 values: the shadow, kind of the half tone, and the lighter. And just placing them in there. And there's also a lot of scraping and starting over in areas. So I'll scrape maybe these yellow trees if I don't like the way it's going and just repaint them. And a lot of times painting's not this big, I'll scrape the whole painting once I get it all covered and let that dry and then just repaint it. And it repaints so much easier because I already have all the drawing down, I have all the values, and I have the color. And I can repaint it and focus more on the brushwork. And I do that a lot. Not so much with 30 by 40s and bigger, but then you can see some of the color change in the mountain here in the shadow. The shadow is light enough here that you can see into it and see more color variation. Same thing with the lighter yellow trees. A lot of violet, orange, red-orange, violet and red-orange. So a lot of color variation. And the variation is for the most part analogous colors, colors that are similar, but not always. Sometimes I'll put complementary colors, like there is some orange in the shadow here or red-orange. But there's a lot of blue-green, blue-violet, violet in the shadow too. And those colors are more analogous to the blue shadow. But the complementary colors kind of create a bit more vibration when but this orange here against that blue really vibrates, and that's what I was after. So that will do it. It's kind of a step-by-step thought process of, again, thinking about three things here: simplifying the shape, simplifying the value, and then simplifying the color. Then at the end, I can make the color as complicated as I want and the value complicated, which I did down here more than I needed to. But anyway, that's the thought process.